Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Roll call. Lisa's out of town,
Yes. Yeah, she's.
right? Lisa's out of town. And Mike is unavailable as well. Attest to publication.
I saw it posted.
Thank you, Joni. Approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion. Oh, go ahead, Julie, Shelley.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Motion made by Shelley, seconded by Lori to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. We'll start with district reports. Next steps to facilities planning.
Yeah, we will welcome the team from Nexus, and I'll have them introduce themselves and kind of share what we've been working on since our last meeting and what the next steps will look like. So, Russ, we'll let you take it from there. If you want to come right up kind of in front of that table, we'll still get you on camera and talking to the mic.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I can hear, obviously. I have it
That's
on
perfect.
correctly.
That's perfect.
Thank you very much, School Board. Congratulations on the referendum. We're very excited to get going, get started. We're kind of moving into the next phase. You've seen Kevin and Brian up to this phase. We've been supporting them in the background. My name is Russ Schumacher. I'm one of the principals of Nexus, oversee the design and commissioning. With me tonight is one of our lead program managers who will be shepherding the design process for all of the projects starting a couple weeks ago. He's been plugged into the project. So we'd just like to give you an update of what's been happening since the referendum has passed and what's in store for you over the next few months. 2 days after the referendum, Kevin arranged for a call to connect with the folks on the referendum team, just to kind of get a feel for what went well, what things can we improve on, how do we go from here, what are the next steps, and just get a little bit of fresh feedback while it was fresh in everybody's mind, which was very helpful for us to kind of start the process and get a feel for how things are flowing information-wise with the district. And I got to say, David's been 2 steps ahead of us on getting things ahead and getting us information and getting us off to a great start. So we're looking forward to just a great process. We basically reserved the times available coming up so that we could set a regular cadence of meetings, reviewed our design team and process, and the scope as well. You'd made a lot of progress on the scope during the initial development planning phase, which was great. You had a lot of input. Since we had some time to think about it and take a look at it from different angles, there's some immediate adjustments that we want to make to the design based on input from y'all. So we're basically almost to the end of schematic design as we move into the design process on the elementary. A lot of work was done on that. The schedule and phasing we reviewed. We want to issue an early package so that we can get into design, get into the ground with footings and foundations, and then talk to the district leadership team on how we should best arrange to fit your district, the design process, the design teams, and then eventually the user groups, so the folks that are going to be inhabiting the spaces, so we get it right. It is your project. We treat it like it's our own, but it is yours, and we want to make sure that we get it the way you want it. And then the initial review of the draft agreements to get the contracts up and going.
Good evening. My name is Jared Tatro, also with Nexus. I'll be the program manager on the job from kind of here on out. So I'll be your contact on kind of a daily, weekly basis. So for the design team and the leadership group, you'll get to know me very well, and I'll hopefully get to know you all very well. What we've done now is partnered with HSR out of La Crosse for architecture, Paragon Site Civil to help us with that, mechanical engineering. Nexus handles all that. We have some great engineers in-house that take care of that. Plumbing as well. Electrical with Galileo. Building professionals group. Tom Granetsky, great guy, knows building envelope really well. It's going to help us with kind of sealing up the exterior, some cleanup with that. And I think that's the majority of our group, but nice to meet everybody. And
We did attempt to partner with all local consultants wherever possible. All of them except for Building Envelope Professionals Group are out of the La Crosse area, so everybody's close. We'll be here. You'll see a lot of us over the next few months here. As we get into the process and get about halfway through the design, we'll start to bring in construction management and project management team that'll oversee the construction and installation of the project. So you'll start to see them fold into board meetings as well as we start to move them into the process, start to hand off the project to them from an install perspective for the last half of the design, so they can start to phase the plan, phase the construction, when do teachers have to empty out desks, all those sorts of things. They'll work through all of the logistics there. As far as our process, talking to the district, we customize it to each district depending on how they want to approach it. Ultimately, the school board here has full approval of the final product. We will brief you at certain milestones, usually the 50% completion, so that you can see how the design process has gone, what's been done, what changes have been made and what adjustments have been made, and what reasons those are done, so that you're aware of the process itself. And then also we'll present that before it goes out for bid at the 95%. The district leadership team will consist of your admin staff, some facilities folks. David's putting those together as we speak, and they will be kind of the steering committee of the project to make sure that if there is, as we're meeting with different groups and different teams, if half of the folks want it one way, the other half the other, they'll be the tiebreaker. And we'll also want to make sure that we fold into the district's direction on how you'll approach certain things.
Yeah, and this is where I've talked to our Building and Grounds Committee, which is Lori and Shelley and Tina. I will keep you guys apprised to those district leadership teams, especially when we get to some of those tiebreaker type decisions. I will see that one of you is able, or at least one of you is able to be at those meetings, to be a part of those discussions. When we look at the building level committees, which, as I know where you're going to, I've already talked a little bit with Tina, who has some interest in being more a part of the elementary process and would be a great fit with that team. And Lori then being a little bit more a part with the middle school, high school, and the old school kind of group as we go through some of those things. And again, just Shelley's schedule may not allow it during the day, but we will make sure that she is well informed as the chair of that committee, as part of that district leadership team on where things are and how things are developing, so that she's got that input in that. So then when we are bringing things back to the whole board, your 3 building and grounds members will have a good understanding of what we're presenting. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll be looking for your input on the type of materials, from your maintenance staff, type of flooring, type of paint, all that sort of thing, type of mechanical equipment that you'll like, to make sure that we want to definitely get multiple vendors in so we can get competitive price to get the best value for the taxpayer. But we don't want to have 100 different vendors being able to provide things. So we want to whittle it down to something you're comfortable with. At the building design level, for the elementary, there'll be a separate team, as well as for the middle, high school, old school gym, that'll focus just on their buildings. And so that'll be a little bit more focused. And then at the base of the pyramid, there are the people that truly inhabit the space, use the space, educate in the space. We want to make sure that once the spaces are defined on where they're going to be at, that they get built to how the collective group there wants to approach it, from casework for the teaching wall to data ports to electrical outlets. All that sort of thing gets coordinated, and they definitely have some input and can have their handprints on the design itself. Any questions on the design process? It's very collaborative. It has a lot of involvement. We'll be asking a lot of questions. We'll be providing options to you as you work through the process, but it's a very involved process. It does take time, and we'd like to thank you in advance. Just like if you build a house or remodeled, there's a lot of decisions to be made. We make a lot of them that stuff behind ceilings and behind walls, but educate you on what we're doing. So if you want to see it a different way, we can make adjustments. Any questions on the process? As far as the project schedule, like I said, you guys have made a lot of progress in the elementary school in the planning process, where you wanted things, where the addition was, how many classrooms you wanted. We'll fine-tune that as we move forward. There's typically a schematic design process, a design development process, a construction document process, and then ultimately it gets sent out for bid. It does take some time. I mean, you're building a 100 and some year building here. We want to make sure we take the time to do it right and get the input needed to make sure things are arranged the way it makes sense for generations to come. Middle and high school will follow shortly on the heels of the elementary school. We will want to get an early package out for footings, foundations, and utilities, so we can get the site work going on the elementary school and so that we can build it as efficiently as possible for you. And then the old school gym will follow after the middle high school. I know there's some thoughts of, what can we do to incorporate, make that a nice functional space for you. So that's kind of how we have it kind of lined out from a progression. The one that's the quickest to jump on because of the work that's been done up to this point is the elementary school, and the one we want to get into the ground first. So that works well. So you'll probably see in our project manager sooner rather than later on that, because by end of February, we're going to want to have a footings and foundations package out there. So it's going to move quick once we get the process started.
And I think in line with that goes with our calendar conversation that we had at the last board meeting. The intention will be to have that addition complete and ready to be moved into over the winter break of 23 into, of 23 into 24. So we are going to move pretty quickly on that to make that happen, and that's part of the calendar revisions we'll make tonight.
As all of you are aware, you have a lot of equipment lead time issues right now and supply chain issues. It is by every passing month getting better. So by the end of this, it'll hopefully be better than it is now, but there is certain things we have to plan for. Electrical equipment, for example, just certain components can take up to a year. Generators can take up to a year. We want to make sure to get ahead of those quickly so that we can get them on order while the rest of the process is taking place. So we may be with you sooner rather than later for some mechanical equipment, for some electrical equipment that we'll want approval on to order as the rest of the process takes place. So we'll map all that out as time goes on here. Any questions? Thank you very much. We look forward to the process here.
Thank you.
Thanks for driving up, guys.
Okay, insurance of bonds
Yeah,
to fund, and I'm sorry,
issuance.
you have bonds to fund the facility projects, informational.
Yeah, so we definitely pulled in the expert tonight. We've got Brian Brewer with us that is going to kind of lay out the strategy that we have been working on to fund all of the projects, and I really feel like we've got a good plan. Could adapt a little bit as we go, but I think right now to move forward and get things started, Brian's going to lay this out for us. This is a important discussion when Angie's here, and she has been a part of all these conversations, and so we'll all be here to hopefully answer the questions that will lead us into really the next 4 resolutions that we'll be looking to act on tonight. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. Good to see everyone again. Congratulations on your successful referendum process. So now the fun begins, as you just heard about the planning and build out and bidding and all of that good stuff for the projects. This part is the positioning the district to implement the financing plan that we've been discussing. We use conservative estimates during the planning process on purpose. Ideally, as we work our way through this process, those interest rate estimates were conservative enough. I'll show you where the current updated illustration is and what that means and when are we going to be able to lock in the majority of the 24 million. As David mentioned, you have 4 resolutions that would position us to act quickly over the next basically 6 weeks as we implement the first portion of the long-term financing. So this is the slide that I've shown each time I visit the district and we talk about long-term borrowing and long-term interest rates. As we talked about the last time I was here, rates this year have moved higher. Long-term rates have moved higher. However, as you look at this bottom chart, it's a 30-year visual of long-term municipal borrowing rates. And it puts it in perspective that while rates have moved higher throughout 2022,
historically speaking, they're still very, very favorable for locking in 20-year financing. You know, as we currently stand, we're just back to the levels that we saw post Great Recession in that time period, in those years shortly thereafter. And if I take this chart further into the past, you'd have to get back into post-World War II before you were in this area where we currently are. So, you know, it's still a very favorable time period to lock in long-term borrowing against a long-term investment in the facilities. Your next agenda item, I think, also talks about the investment rates that would happen during the construction period, which makes it actually a little bit better than the last 12, 13 years, because those are more closely tied to the Federal Reserve rates that have been moving higher throughout the year. So they're very short-term interest rates, and so those are higher than they've been in basically the last 10, 12 years, which will allow you to actually earn a little bit in the project account from the time we close on the long-term financings until you spend the proceeds of those borrowings on the project costs. In the upper right corner, you may have seen some news in the last couple of weeks, basically post the election cycle. Interest rates have actually, long-term interest rates have actually moved back lower throughout November, which is helpful, right? If they keep moving lower throughout December, that'll be helpful as well, because you know the plan is to lock in as quickly as we can in 2023 and still achieve the 20-year financing period that goes out to 2043 for this first portion of the financing. So this slide is a little bit more detailed. It's something that Angie, David, and I and my team have talked about, and it's why you have 4 different resolutions and not just one. So the federal government created in the tax code an incentive for banks to participate and actively purchase municipal debt from issuers that they quote unquote deem as small issuers, and the level that qualifies a school district as a small issuer in a calendar year is no more than 10 million of tax exempt. So that would make, if you borrow less than 10 million in a calendar year, that makes you eligible to be bank qualified. So banks then can have an extra tax write-off on the carrying cost of their interest, which then translates through to better long-term rates. So the blue line on this chart, it is a representation of the bank qualified estimate versus the red line, which would be the non-bank qualified, had we just done all 24 million all at once. So it's really the years after like the 7th or 8th year of a 20-year where the biggest benefit occurs. So if you read the agenda ahead, you'll see that the first action tonight is a $9,250,000 bond anticipation note. That number, we worked backward from a $750,000 line of credit for the cash flow for 2022. So to get you up to 10 million, that was the most we could do for 2022. Then in January, since it'll be now 2023, that resolution is not to exceed 10 million, okay? And then the remaining 2 are the long-term general obligation bonds. So that will be what will be fixed interest rates for the up to 20 years. And so one is to refinance the bond anticipation note for tonight, and one is to refinance the bond anticipation note in January, okay? So all of that is to try to position you to take advantage of this gap in rates on bank qualified versus non-bank qualified. So right now that range is in the 25 to 35 basis point range, so 0.25% or 0.35%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you apply that to 19,250,000 over 20 years, it saves over $800,000 in the financing plan. So it's worth the extra paperwork, the brand new pens to sign the multiple pages of resolutions later tonight. But that's why we're breaking apart the 24 million into a multiple phase approach to try and take advantage of that. So ultimately, all of this is trying to help us achieve the overriding goals, to minimize the total increase in the mill rate, minimize the total interest cost, minimize interest rate risk. So you'll notice that we're talking about 19,250,000. So we're leaving 4,750,000 for 2024, early 2024. There are two reasons for that. One is the bank qualified that I just talked about, so we're taking advantage of the two 10 million amounts. The other is the plan always called for a final year, the final repayment year in the 21st year. But you can only borrow up to 20 years from the time you borrow it initially long term. So we always were going to wait for some portion in 2024. And we'll show you how we're minimizing the interest rate exposure during that time period that we're waiting on that final 4,750,000 on the next page. And then ultimately, by borrowing the 19,250,000, it helps you to maximize the investment earnings, because those dollars will go into that project account, and then they'll be invested according to state statute and your investment policy, which is limited to very short, very liquid, and very safe investments. So it's, as a quick summary, it's direct obligations of the U.S. government, so a U.S. Treasury note or bond. It is the local government investment pool, which is a very liquid fund, WISC, which is a very liquid, highly rated liquid fund, so very short term, and then bank CD products that are limited to either the FDIC insurance limit or they're collateralized in some other way with securities that are held by a third party. So it's not, you're not relying on the bank to tell you, don't worry about it, we have it collateralized, right? If you use that route, there will be collateral held by a third-party bank that is backing the CD investment. So all of those are going to be very safe and very in accordance with state statutes and your investment policy. So then the paperwork that Angie, David, and I have been working on and will continue to work on over the next few weeks, one of those is finalizing the credit rating for the district. So currently on the long-term debt that's outstanding, the rating is an A1 by Moody's Investor Service. And this is their credit scoring, if you will. And so the majority of districts are in Wisconsin are either an A1 or like a high A or a low AA. And a lot of that is based on the reason school districts are in that range is that in Wisconsin, your ability as a board locally to raise revenue is limited by the revenue limit. So you don't have as flexible revenue raising as other states that they compare you against. So that's part of it. Part of it's the size of district. Part of it is the size and economic and demographics of the communities that you serve. So all of that factors into why the majority of Wisconsin schools will be in that high single A, low double A credit range. Given that you're finishing up your prior debt and taking on new debt, my expectation is that you would maintain the rating. I wouldn't expect that you would increase. We will work on trying to increase it, but to manage your expectations as a board, we should be happy if we're maintaining the existing credit rating, given that you're embarking on this next investment in the school facilities. Repayment term, as I talked about, is 20 years from the date of issuance, and then ultimately we're stepping into the payment and then leveling it out so that your principal and interest during the repayment term is level, so within your total school budget. So phase 1 and phase 2, I've already kind of walked through some of this. The 9,250,000 and then the 10 million. So ultimately, in early 2023, we will close the long-term issues as of March 1, so we'll lock it in January and February with a closing that's March 1 or after. The reason for March 1 is your payment dates are March 1 going forward on principal. And that allows you to go to March 1 of 2043. Okay? So in order to maximize the 20-year payback for this first portion of the total. Ultimately, the parameters, which the board has used in prior years, it delegates the final sign-off once the paperwork is all in place, credit ratings in place, and the legal docs from Quarles and Brady are received. The president and clerk will come back in to review with David and Angie. You know that the board set certain parameters, like you're not going to borrow in aggregate more than the 24 million authorized. It's not higher than the rate. It's not, all of the details are met, which allows us in January and February to lock in those rates when everything's in place and when the market, seems to be advantageous in that time period when we're ready. Okay, and you're not tied to a regular board meeting night or calling a special meeting to try and find that specific night. So the benefit of the parameters is it gives more daily flexibility to finalize in the first part of 2023. And then the final issue is the 2024, and it's not easy to see, but I'll if you have the printed copy, one of the things we do with trying to minimize that interest rate exposure on that final $4 million is the first long-term issue is going to lock in your longest maturities in 2043, 2042, 2041, 2040, 39. Those will be locked as quickly in 23 as we can. Shortly thereafter, we'll come back and lock the middle part of the principal. And then the $4,750,000 that remains, the majority of it will be paid in the first 6 years. So even if rates move higher in that year, you're paying those maturities off first. So the effort is to try and lock in the longest $19,250,000 that we can lock in. Use the final six years in the short end to pay off the debt from 2024, knowing that we have this one maturity that is scheduled for 2044. Does that make sense? There's a lot going on this page, and this will continue to change as we go, but this is the sheet that David and Angie and I spent a lot of time talking through how all the pieces will fit together. Ultimately, we're trying to achieve this orange column, which is your existing Fund 39 debt levy plus the new payments on principal and interest. Like I said, it's hard to read up there, but this year's levy for debt was $1,760,000. And using these conservative estimates for rates, that levels out at about $1,815,000, let's call it. So it's about $50,000. Your final step in your debt levy is about $50,000 if it comes in exactly this way. Ideally, the interest rates come in a little lower, and we're able to lower the orange payment amount and close that gap between the $1,760,000 that's baked into 22, 23 and the future levies in future years. Okay?
So at this point, the only rate that we know is the $9,250,000 at the 4.84. Correct.
And that's a short-term rate that's going to be paid off with this first long-term issue. Correct.
Okay.
So that rate will be outstanding for 3 months, and then it'll be paid off.
Okay.
Correct. Any macro question? Again, I know I'm throwing a lot of technical things. Any macro questions? Again, if you get asked tomorrow, so how are you going to implement the financing, right? We're going to borrow $19,250,000 of the 24 as quickly in 2024 and lock it in, and then begin investing those dollars in the project fund. In 2020. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said 24. In 2023. And then the way we've mitigated the fact that rates may go up throughout 2023 before we get to that final is that you'll pay off the largest portion of it in those first 6 years, so it won't be outstanding for very long. And then we do have this 1 year in 2020 or 2044. If rates do move a lot higher, we can potentially, finance it in a 10-year with the intent to do another 10-year at some point. But I don't think we'll need to get to that, but that's part of the way we'll manage the fact that you have one payment that is planned for 2044 that you cannot lock in until we get to 2024.
I think just in concept too, the fact that, we don't need to spend the money immediately, but the advantages of taking it now, and not taking all of it now. And that means you're not carrying some of that debt for the full time. So that all of those things help too. So, yeah, we've been around this about 5 or 6 different times. Like I said, Brian is going to stick around as we talk about those bonds proceeds too. That factors into this. This plan, as you said, 800,000, 600, 800,000. We've thrown a number of different numbers around before everything was kind of finalized, in savings for our taxpayers, which is really important. The investments, where we're looking at maybe an $800,000, $850,000 in interest income can be added right to our projects to increase scope of our projects. And, really hopefully we address this roof immediately before this is all said and done with some of those proceeds as well. So that's one of those things that we've talked about and we've planned for and we've invested for in Fund 47, but we hopefully can use that and, on one of those bigger items that we've had in mind too. So it's all been really interesting, and I think this is a good plan for the district.
So tentative timeline, discussion tonight, and then the action on the 4 resolutions. The next kind of paperwork process that David, Angie, and I will be walking through is the bond rating, credit rating process, and then we create what's called an official statement, which is think of it as the prospectus for the bond offering. So there's a lot of due diligence that goes around that, making sure that we have the latest, greatest audited figures, your budget, your final budget, like all of the factors, economic and demographic factors of the district built into that document. And that becomes what is used to offer the bonds to the public, when we lock in those rates in January and February. Those will also be offered to local financial institutions as well. Sometimes local banks would like to buy portions of the total. Like often they don't like going out the full 20 years, but they may like the 7th year, the fourth year, to buy as a local investment a portion of the full 20 year. So lots of TBD dates in here, but it's basically intended to show you that throughout January and early February we're taking the steps to finalize. Ultimately, the president and clerk would unfortunately need to be available for some planning times. We'll give heads up as to when we're thinking about trying to get it into the market and locked in, but that would require some visits to the district office to review docs and make a final sign off. So this final slide is the bond anticipation note for tonight, the $9,250,000. It was a 6-month maturity, but the plan is to pay it off March 15th. So we'll close on the long-term bonds on or shortly after March 1st, and then turn around and pay off the construction loan on March 15th. The lowest bank bid that we received for this loan is from Huntington Public Capital Corporation. They have branch locations throughout Wisconsin, but the headquarters is in Columbus, Ohio, and that rate is a 4.84, and that will only be outstanding for those 3 months. So with that, if there are no other questions, then thank you for
Yeah.
following along and, you know.
Thank you, Brian,
I know
for trying to make
a lot of
it.
technical, and I do want to make sure I also give credit to Angie and David. It takes a lot of extra time to listen to us, you know, and, you know, walk through this scenario versus that scenario, and in addition to what they're doing daily in the district office. So, and that won't end after tonight. It'll actually probably ramp up more after tonight.
Yeah.
But they do a great job for the district and for the board.
We appreciate the long-term partnership. I think that's invaluable, and you guys have seen Brian multiple times and seen Baird here, and that's just incredibly valuable to have that trusted relationship. So thank you.
I think the information was very helpful. I didn't realize how flexible it was with locking in the rates and being able to lock in the really far ones and have that security ahead of time so that when we get towards the end of the project, I think we'll have a better idea of our money, where we sit, where the rates are at that time, because a lot of people I think are concerned with rates, but this really gives you that security. And to have the breakdown ahead of time and the planning is really good. So I appreciate all of the information.
You're welcome, and we'll keep updating each of those. Like, to your point, you said the only thing that's locked right now is your action tonight.
Right.
So, you know, at each stage, we'll have better information, and we can tighten up what that final financing will look like, you know, along the way.
And Baird just.
Hopefully rates keep going down.
Right. And I can just say that Baird does a very good job of putting the bids out there and letting all the banks see it. And, you know, it's definitely out there, so.
All right. Well, with that, we'll move right to the district action items, if that's okay. The next four are the resolutions that Brian has discussed. So I don't think we need to read the whole resolution, but we should read the language as it is presented in the recommended action. If you're going to make that motion, please.
I will make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of a $9,250,000 bond anticipation note pursuant to section 67.12, para 1, para B, Wisconsin statutes.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion made by Lori, seconded by Shelley. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Subject B.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of a note of not to exceed $10 million bond anticipation note pursuant to section 67.12, para 1, para B, Wisconsin statutes.
I'll second.
Motion made by Joni, seconded by Tina. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Subject C.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $9,250,000 general obligations refunding bonds, Series 2023A.
I'll second.
Motion made by Shelley, seconded by Lori. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Subject D.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale not to exceed 10 million general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2023B.
And I'll second that. Motion made by Lori, seconded by Julie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Bond proceeds management.
Yeah, what we're looking for here, and if you take a look, I'm trying to figure out pages. Pages 92, 93, 94, 95. What you're looking at there is projections. They are estimates on proceeds that could be gained through an investment strategy of using the bonds before we have to actually spend them on the construction process. And that interest summary shows that they're basing it on the same three issuances that we have, how they would go with the rates. Rates are all based on what was accurate as of the 28th, November 28th. They are not allowed to project that things may go up or down, so we could see fluctuation in that. Reality is if trends are going up on interest, then we would see trends go up here. If they're going down, we'd see trends go down here. The result of this is about additional $834,000 that would be available towards the projects, through the referendum process. If you look at this, as Brian talked about, this is all very short term. This is all very fluid. This is low risk type investments for the district. Important, we did meet with two different companies. Angie and I had full proposals from two different companies, kind of heard from both of them, did consult with Brian a little bit on this as well. PMA is the company that we have worked with in the past. We have agreements and the WISC account created with PMA. That was created with Roger and Dorothy and I know Rod Hunt, I think, was the signer on that, one of the signers. So we will basically just update that resolution. That's the cleanest way to do it with the current names, of the officers and Angie and I. But we can move forward without any other resolutions with a partnership we have used in the past, and hopefully take advantage of some interest that could come in our favor here. They will do a great job of tracking all of this, and I think an added bonus that we've been able to determine, Nexus will actually be able to bill us completely, and it'll all be broken down for who's getting what and what those dollar amounts, but we get one bill basically from Nexus throughout this process, which helps, and they manage everything and give us a binder of all of those purchases. PMA will actually pay that invoice and keep track of all of that on their end. So throughout this process, when you're talking, I don't know how many different invoices will be happening, especially if they were from each individual vendor. This is going to free up a lot of Angie's time as well. So that will be another account that they are setting up and that they will pay directly out of that. So that will be huge for the functioning of our office to have them helping manage this, not only for the financial gains, but for those payments and then keeping track of all of that and protecting us from arbitrage, which is a new word that I learned. Basically, there's some tax issues that could come in if we end up making way more money than what we're paying on interest. They figure all that out for us, and if that was the problem we were facing, that would be a good problem to face. So again, they will work us through all that. So again, I'm just looking for action, and so that you guys know that we will continue or restart our partnership with PMA, and have conversations scheduled with them on the 14th already, just to plan for what will happen when we close on the 15th of December. So
you say low risk. Obviously, any money we gain interest-wise is a benefit and stuff that way. Is there any risk of loss? Because that will be asked.
Yeah, so I think that's why state statutes are as limiting as they are. It's intending to protect principal. Like, even if it means you're not maximizing return,
Right.
which is fine, right? You want return of principal as more than you want return on principal, right? So that's why it's limited to such short and safe types of vehicles. And so I don't think anybody can ever say there's no loss, so I gotta get that out there. But within this type of investment, what they will do on the 14th is show you the local government investment pool. They'll show you the WISC. Those are both liquid funds, so daily liquidity or weekly liquidity. Then the longer you go out, like a month or a 3-month or a 9-month, right? They'll have U.S. Treasury rates, I think a 3-month U.S. Treasury is like a 4.5 right now, right? And that's a direct obligation of the U.S. government. So you can't get much more safe than that.
Right.
So then they will line up. They'll talk to the local banks to find out what portions of that, which CD rates they want to participate in. That'll be in the mix. And then they have a network, I think they say 1,200 nationally, that they put the schedule out to and say, here's the estimated amounts to be invested out to each of these future months. And then they'll bring back to you the highest rates that are available to that network of banks. And again, it's either going to be insured by the Federal Home Loan Bank, another government agency, or it'll be the requirement of the bid is that there'll be collateral pledged and held in a third-party account that's at a different, in custody of the district's name at a third party. So those levels of security are trying to minimize and eliminate the risk of loss during this time period.
Right. And yeah, I understand that. Just like I said, it will be asked, when it gets out there and stuff that way, and just to limit the black swan event type of thing. Which, if it is a daily thing, obviously, hopefully you can get out and stuff that way. But I understand.
Yeah, so there'll be portions that stay liquid, and then there'll be portions that will be fixed term CDs or fixed term treasuries,
Right.
U.S. treasuries. And again, in the end, you get to select where in that range of things you want to be, right?
Okay, sure.
If you look at that next page, there was the summary and then the next page, so like 94 or something like that, you'll actually see that there's the highlighted boxes. There's the WISC, the U.S. Treasury, the PMA Bank, the local banks, those types of things. And the highlighted ones, this is all just projection. This is based on current numbers, a projection of what it would be. He will sit with Angie and I on the 14th, and he will say, this is the numbers as of today. I would recommend that you go with U.S. Treasuries for this, will you go with this? And we will see all of those comparisons, and we will have that ability to choose which direction to go for that short period of time.
Are their broker and clearing fees, are they performance-based or flat fees or?
There's in their proposals, there are flat fees, not to exceed fees within each class, like each type of investment. Buying a U.S. Treasury versus brokering a CD. Those are different rates, but they are a flat rate that then gets taken from the rate of return. So it's not a check to be cut from the district to pay that. It's your rate of return over that time period is reduced by that exact number.
I get we can pay $15,000 to save $500. I was just curious how that worked.
Yeah. And both of the companies that you evaluated, we've worked with across the state, and so this happens a lot, where there's the investment of proceeds, there's that monthly tracking of expenditures, the reporting of your investment returns monthly, such that at the end of the project, you have a binder in the district office of, dollars in, accrued earnings, dollars spent, to, down to zero, which then is what is helpful should there be any future, review by IRS or review by, if there was arbitrage, earnings, which all that really means is that if you're able to borrow using tax exempt and you can invest using taxable, in certain environments like today, you can actually earn more today in the taxable than it takes you to borrow on the tax exempt. So within a small window, you're able to earn and maximize that. And in your case, most of what we're doing, because of the bank qualified, you're going to be able to earn and keep all of it. But they still have to monitor to make sure there's nothing that triggers a rebate to the IRS, which in and of itself isn't a problem, but you would need somebody to help you, do that report, right? And that's what both companies, help districts with, so that Angie doesn't have to calculate it herself.
There will be, we did talk about specifically with PMA, there'll be a monthly report to the board on where the monies are invested and how they're going at. We will absolutely have that updated. We actually talked about it, and I talked with Kevin at Nexus today. We will be revisiting our website and having updated information on our website on our financing, and then obviously on the design process and the construction process, and be able to keep the community up to date with pictures and the financial part of this too. The other part to remember, this is not, we're not doing this for 20 years. We're doing this for maybe 3 years while process is still going on and we're still spending those dollars from the referendum. So it's a short period of time to try to maximize some of those dollars that we have for it. Again, if there's no other questions, I just looking for a motion to approve the relationship with PMA.
I'll make a motion to approve the partnership with PMA for the purpose of bonds proceeds management tied to the November 8th capital referendum and projects.
A second.
Motion made by Shelley, seconded by Tina. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Change in start date resolution.
I just want to say thank you to Brian for being here and helping with all of this, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you we appreciate you. All right, start date. Mr. Brockup?
Yeah, so this ties, F and G really tie together here with the start date change resolution. We discussed at the last meeting, kind of talked through the school calendar for next year, proposing to start before September 1st. I think there was a consensus on that calendar made sense, especially looking at trying to make that summer as long as possible of 24, so as much work can be done as possible, and also accommodating for some moving days during that holiday break of 24, end of 23 into 24, so that we can make sure our teachers have time to move into those new classrooms in that new addition. So to do that, followed up on state statute, talked to DPI, and just clarified the process. So with approval of the resolution that is there for you tonight, I will send the change letter, basically requesting the change to DPI. I'll send a copy of our approved calendar. That's the next action item for approval. When I've talked with them, basically we have met the criteria, and this should be approved without any issue. So we just need the resolution stating that we are doing this for construction purposes.
I only had one question on your calendar, and mainly just because we're here today. We're off this Friday, so this one that you have proposed is the week after. Are you trying to stay as close to this schedule, or is there a reason you picked the 1st over the 8th of December? Do you know? On the calendar.
The professional development day, I think, is what you're talking
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah, we don't have one in November. So
Do you want, what I was saying was, do you want it the 8th or do you want it the 1st? I don't know that it matters, but usually we stay really close, and so this Friday we're off, which is the week after Thanksgiving. I didn't know if you wanted to mimic that or if it mattered. And then, because then it gets you closer to that November, but then it's after Thanksgiving. I didn't know if it was a real reason, but that's the only thing that stuck out to me. Besides, there was no day in January. Oh, the 15th. Did you add that one?
in January,
January 15th.
yeah, that was there
Okay.
last time. The only change in the calendar from our last conversation There are two. One,
Half
the
day.
October parent-teacher conferences and PD Day was moved forward 2 weeks. Talking with the BEA, it made sense for us to have parent-teacher conferences and then have 2 weeks for our kids to make some adjustments if needed before the end of the quarter and before grades came out. So that was really why that move happened there. The other one happened as just part of admin team as we reviewed one final time. We have not done a full day of school on the last day of school in many, many years, and that would be, it'd be an interesting day. So we did move that back to a half day as we have done in the past. So those are the only two changes that I've proposed from the last one. The December one, I guess, Tina, if you felt really strongly
No, I
on
don't.
that, I don't.
That's why I was asking.
The conversation with the BEA and the conversation with admin team, we'd be flexible in those, and they would be more than willing to change. Admin team would be more than willing to change if you felt that was appreciated
no, I
by
didn't.
families.
That was the only change that I really noticed different from just some that we've missed. But I like ending in May and I like starting in August. So
Yeah, and maybe we can continue that moving forward. There's definitely momentum across the state. So
I mean, I think you're going to have some months that are going to be struggles. February is going to be a really long month for you, but I don't think that you can avoid that. So
agreed. So yeah. Thank you. And it is important that we talk about both at the same time, but do have two different action items there. The first is the actual resolution that will be approved, or we're looking for approval for tonight, and then the calendar's F, or calendar's G. So looking for a recommend or action or a motion on F. Thank you. Hopefully almost done talking.
I'll make a motion to approve the change start date resolution seeking DEPI approval. Do you need the whole thing? Approval to change the start date, seeking DPI approval to seek an exemption to the start date as outlined and provided in S118.045 and found in Chapter PI 27.01 and PI 27.03 for the 23-24 school year.
Second.
Motion by Tina, seconded by Joni. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And now to approve the calendar, the 2023-2024 school calendar as printed on page 48.
My apologies. I skipped ahead. Sorry. I thought we were all already ready for the new start date. So those are my questions that I had for your next one.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2023-2024 school year calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion by Joni, seconded by Tina. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, everybody. No other business?
I have one question for you.
We just need to make sure that the two of you
Yep.
stick around with fresh
We
pens.
got the pens.
If by some chance your numbers were not calculated right or you needed 5 more days off, can you change this calendar at any time?
You can. We can. Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
we
mean,
can.
so like if something comes up and we're like, oh, that's not going to happen.
Right. We can.
Yes,
Okay.
we can alter it.
Board has that authority.
Sometimes we have deadlines and timeframes, but
Yep.
if you're going into construction and we don't know what happens, I know we have to give plenty of notice and time, but
Yep.
I mean, we're in
Yep. Yeah, and I think, I think not only the
early,
construction
you know,
timeline.
maybe in May you come back and say, I don't like this anymore, okay.
No, I think we can revisit it as soon as we have warning on it. And I think the other part is there's some flexibility that we have with the state. If we were to have significant weather, polar vortex or something again during that year, we could do a waiver of minutes for that year, that type of thing. So there is some flexibility there. Again, I will not sit here and promote the minimum for our kids. This is not the minimum for kids. kids, but if we got to that point and we were pinched on it, we could go to a waiver. We also could adjust minutes and make some school days. Just making school days 5 minutes longer could make a huge difference for the last 2 months of the school year. So it's a minute thing more than it is a day thing. So we do have some flexibility as we move forward, and we would just communicate that out through you and to families.
When do you expect to hear back if our waiver is approved?
I think we would hear very, very shortly.
Okay.
So again, when I had the conversation with the person in charge of that department, the conversation, I said, we go through this process, we get board approval, we approve a calendar. What's the chance that this doesn't get approved? She said, it'll get approved. It's construction related. It'll get approved.
Okay.
So I will let you know as soon as it is.
Thank you. All right, I ask for adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Joni, seconded by Lori. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, everyone.